Good morning and welcome. Welcome to all board members, to members of the public and of the media who are accessing the meeting virtually today. Just to remind you that the meeting is being recorded for future upload to our web, and also to remind board members and participants to use the show hands facility to speak at the meeting rather than the chat function. Now, before we start this meeting, I want to take this opportunity to congratulate Sarah Compton-Bishop on her appointment to the position of board chair, which she will take up at the beginning of next month. That's only a few days away, Sarah. We're delighted with her appointment. She's been an excellent member of the board since she came onto the board in November 2017. And I'm pleased that the board will continue to benefit from her expertise, her experience, and not least her enthusiasm in her new role as chair. She has shown already impressive leadership skills in her current key roles in the IJB and Staff Governance Committee. And I am confident that she will build on the programme of development and transformation that the board has embarked on. I'd also like to extend the board's congratulations to David Park on his appointment to the post of Deputy Chief Executive. Unfortunately, Dave cannot be with us today, but we extend our best wishes to him as he takes up the role on a permanent basis. It's very gratifying to know that we have a strong and capable leadership team in place now, delivering on our transformation agenda and role modelling the culture and the behaviours we wish to see across the organisation. But as we congratulate new appointees, we're also about to bid farewell to one of our exec colleagues. And I want to congratulate, first of all, Fiona Hogg, our Director of People and Culture, who's going to take up a 2-year secondment with the Scottish Government. This will be her last meeting of this board. So we're going to miss you greatly, Fiona. You've provided outstanding leadership to help us improve our culture, and that's been highly significant for the organisation. Your leadership has contributed in no small measure in NHS Highland being de-escalated to level 2 of the NHS Scotland Performance Management Framework. And as you go to work in the Health Workforce Directorate at Scottish Government as their Chief People Officer from the 1st of next month, we wish you all the very best for the future, Fiona.
Thank you, Chair.
We also want to extend condolences to Tim, who had a family bereavement just last week. Apologies, Ruth. Are there any apologies?
Thank you, Boyd. Yes, we have a few apologies for this morning. We have an apology from Alistair Christie for the whole of the meeting, an apology from Pam Dudek for the morning session, and also an apology from Philip McRae for the morning session as well. And as you've mentioned, David Park passes his apologies for the whole of the meeting, and so does Ruth Fry. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Just to say that Pam is at the Health and Sports Committee and Scottish Parliament today and will be joining us as soon as her commitment there allows. Declarations of conflict of interest. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Don't see any hands up, so move on to item 3, the minutes of the meeting of the 31st of January and the action plan. So If we can just go through the minutes for accuracy, pages 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, and page 9. Can I ask if you're happy to approve the minutes then? Don't see any hands up objecting. Okay, thank you, colleagues, for approving. And we have some action, a couple of actions listed there. Ruth, is there anything to update on that?
Thank you, Boyd. Yes, so the tracker shows that there's been good progress on some of the outstanding actions, with only 2 remaining on it at the moment. The action number 5, the Chief Executive's report relating to maternity business, the maternity services business case, that will be touched on by Pam when she arrives and she gives her own update. The item relating to the National Care Service will remain on the tracker until the board is assured that the risks and opportunities associated with the National Care Service have been fully explored.
Thank you, Ruth. Any other matters arising from the minutes? If not, we can move on to the integrated performance and quality report, which is a first main item of business. And normally at this stage, I would ask David to orchestrate this on our behalf. Today, Catherine is taking over the baton, I believe. And just to say that there have been changes, of course, in personnel. A number of roles have changed since our last meeting, and that has implications for the agenda today and indeed for the papers that have been prepared as well. I think Rhiannon has taken over the role here from previously occupied by Lorraine, but Catherine will tell us more about all of that and take us through the IPQR. Catherine.
Thank you, Boyd. And certainly some large shoes to fill, and I have my L plates on, so bear with me in terms of the presentation. The report follows a similar format to previous reports. I'd just like to highlight to colleagues that there was a request at the previous board meeting for us to start to lay out some trajectories in the report, and I think you'll see that in certain sections we have delivered on that. In terms of the actual recovery of TTG outpatients and diagnostics, we have been in recent discussion with Scottish Government, and there is a draft plan with them. So there will be trajectories that will be reflected in the next version of the report for those areas once those have been agreed formally with the Scottish Government, just in case you wondered what was happening in terms of that request in action. You'll see within the report that we are offering moderate assurance in terms of our delivery against the ADP and our overarching performance metrics. And Boyd, I'm more than happy to take questions. Obviously, the report has been through the various governance committees and has been considered prior to coming to this board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, for the introduction, and invite questions for Catherine and colleagues on the substance of the report. Sarah.
Thanks. I've got very sticky buttons this morning. I was pressing the hand on and off. So this just might be me not fully understanding the data, but can I just ask a question around the targets for diagnostics? I can see we've got a lot of data there on the waiting list sizes and the number of patients. but am I missing somewhere in the data how long are we breaching the 6 weeks? How long is the longest wait? And that just might be my lack of familiarity with this particular set of data. But if that's, I'd be interested to know if we have that data, and if not, if we could bring that back to a future committee. Thank you.
Yeah, we do absolutely. I'll take that one, Sarah. And we absolutely do have that data, and we can project the information in that format. And certainly the trajectories that we set for ourselves will be looking at a return to trajectory. On the whole, we are not far off delivering on those key targets. Our main area of pressure in the Health Board is MRI scanning and the capacity to deliver that. So in terms of those diagnostic areas, more than happy to take that forward, and we can come back with a slightly different format for the way in which that information is presented. Thank you.
Morning, everybody, and apologies in advance if my dog enters the fray here with me. I'm on dog duty today. So a couple of questions, Catherine, or whoever would be most appropriate to answer. The first concerns some data that we've recently seen at Highland Health and Social Care Committee, where added to that committee's IPQR has been data on waiting times for specialities that are not required to be reported to Scottish Government. And I just wondered whether we should be looking at any such waiting times, whether in community or in acute, here at board level. And secondly, just wondering what particular factors have led to the offer of moderate assurance when we've been receiving limited assurance in recent months. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. So there's a huge range of supporting infrastructure that goes in across the patch, as you'll be very well and familiar with through the Highland Health and Social Care Committee. Which range of metrics we look at in this meeting is probably something we would want to take away and discuss. There are key performance metrics that the board is measured on, and those are mainly the focus for the IPQR in terms of that outcome. But there is a number of process metrics that need to be examined at a deeper level within the organisation that actually contribute to the delivery of the high level performance metrics for the board. If you wish, Anne, I'm more than happy to discuss that out with this meeting. I'm sure David would as well, in terms of how we enhance this report based on your reflections through the Highland Health and Social Care Committee. And in terms of the question around moderate assurance, I think that moderate assurance has been based on the fact that we are making progress. We have come through winter reasonably well, as you'll see through some of the metrics in the report. We've maintained our operating, including our orthopaedic operating throughout the winter period. We've delivered a reasonably healthy ED performance. It's not where we want to be, and we want to continue to improve on those metrics. But nevertheless, when we compare ourselves across Scotland and indeed against the various pressures that have been on the system, I think it's a reasonable reflection to say that we are delivering a moderate assurance and performance in the report. As we go into the next financial year, obviously we need to reset our trajectories and our targets, as I've mentioned earlier, and we'll then start to measure our performance against those revised trajectories. I hope that helps answer your question, Anne.
Want to come back, Anne?
No, that's fine. I will be interested to hear what other people think about that issue. Thanks.
Susan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Catherine. And I really appreciate the trajectories and the forecasting that I'm beginning to see in the reports. It's something that a number of board colleagues asked for, and it's good to see that happening. My comment and question is about the CAMS service, and again, pleased to see that you are reporting a significant improvement there. But I would just like to ask a bit more about those people experiencing the longest waits, the 3 years or more. Is that due to the particular complexity of those cases, or is, you know, those seem to be great outliers? Could you say anything about those particularly long waits? Thank you.
Yes, some of that relates to capacity, particularly within the CAMS service, and we have changed the service model. So we're managing to increase our capacity within the CAMS service by shifting some of our workforce model. We've taken forward some org change, and we're now recruiting many more nurses, and we've had a really good response to that. So we do believe that we'll be able to increase our capacity around that. The NDAS service is the service that we feel we need to put a further focus on, and that's the area where we have much longer waits, and that is a significant area of concern for us as a senior executive team. We are working in that space with that service and examining how we organise the service so that the access to the NDAS assessments are actually prioritised within the various services that contribute to the delivery of the service overall. You'll understand that the NDAS service relies on a number of professionals to undertake a range of assessments, and then that contributes to an overarching assessment as to what the best support is for those children. So we're examining how we can actually prioritise that within the various services that contribute to that, and we believe that will be the most successful way of improving for the NDAS service. But in terms of the CAMS service, it is absolutely capacity, and we've changed the workforce model, and we believe we'll start to see a significant improvement in terms of waits for those children that still are experiencing significantly long waits. It's fair to say as well that we do regularly review long waiting children, and there is a fast track service into service so that under a more urgent care approach, if it's deemed appropriate, then those children and those families can be expedited within those arrangements as well.
Jerry.
Thank you, Boyd, and morning all. Thank you, Catherine. I've got a question which is maybe just a bit of a follow-up in relation to CAMS. It's probably the other side of the coin from Susan's question. I was looking at the graph on page 21, and I was looking at the relationship between the size of the waiting list, which I think, as the report indicates, has dropped quite significantly. I think circa 80 since September, October of last year, but actually the number of breaches has really dropped by several hundred. And I just wonder, Catherine, and I think you might already have partly answered it, is that as a consequence of a change in the working model and indicating that we've now got capacity in the system to manage new referrals? And I had a second question, which is more for Boyd. I had picked up on the complaints performance from August to December 22 had significantly deteriorated, and I just wonder if we've got a plan to pick that up again. So thank you, Boyd.
Catherine, and then
Shall I come in first on the CAMS question, Jerry? Yes, we have put a lot of focused work into the CAMS service. We have been targeting the longest waiting children and families within the CAMS service, and we did bring in additional capacity. So we ran a pseudo sort of waiting list initiative for the CAMS service and addressed the situation in that way. Whilst we were waiting to change the workforce model, the sustainable position going forward will be about increasing capacity through changing the workforce model. So hopefully that helps explain that for you, Jerry. And I'll bring Boyd in to respond to the complaints performance question.
Thanks, Jerry. Yeah, so complaints are the last quarter of 2022, we did see a downturn in overall performance. A variety of factors thought to be causing that, and in conjunction with the chief officers and the relevant parts of NHS Highland, efforts are being made into this year to catch back on what got less well performed. We think some of the factors were the system pressures, and so staff were who would be mostly involved in responding to complaints were also responding to a crisis of sort of increased sort of pressure in the system, and also some staffing challenges as we had COVID and other infections happening. So we're looking to see an improvement in the data, and there have been some early signs of improvement in this year. And I would hope that data will start to come through into the IPQR. We do see the data a little in arrears, as you know, because it comes through the governance committees prior to board, and so we always have a time lag. Having said that, I do believe that we have an ongoing challenge with our complaints performance, and 50% has been our peak over the last 18 months, and that still isn't where we would want it to be. And so there needs to be further work, and I would say that on behalf of those that are involved in overseeing it.
Okay, Jerry is content, right? And Susan, you're happy with the responses? Yeah, okay, thanks. Alex, and then Joanne.
Thanks, Boyd. Morning, everybody. Yeah, Catherine, just a question on the cancer times, the 62-day in particular. Do we understand why? I know that there's big efforts going on to try to improve that, and I know you've moved people around to help that. But have we got to the bottom of why the 62 is so different from the 31? Do we understand why that trend has been down and has been down for some time? And it seems to have bottomed out at this just under 70%, where the other one, the 31 day, we've been bouncing about 90 for some time. Do we understand the difference? And do we understand the why? Thanks.
Yeah, so within the 62-day target, in terms of the 31-day target, it is a more straightforward target, and certainly we are usually a good performer on the 31-day target. We had some specific issues in relation to breast, and those areas have been addressed and we have started to recover. In terms of the 62-day target, we have struggled more in terms of that area, and you'll know that Lorraine Cowie has actually moved into a different role, so we've put in additional leadership around that. And Lorraine's first reflection to me on the situation is that we do rely on other health boards for some of our patients. So there are patients that go through Lothian to access specialist services, and some go to Grampian as well. And those areas are challenged in terms of their performance, in terms of some of the pathways that we rely on those other health boards for. Within our own health board, we are very much targeting the fact that any patient on a cancer pathway must be prioritised above patients that are not on cancer pathways. And I believe, and Lorraine believes in terms of her first review of the situation, that we actually do have the capacity internally to deliver, but we don't always prioritise as well as we should do in terms of ensuring that these patients are treated and are treated within the targets that we expect them to be treated within. So there is work going on that's being led internally by Lorraine to ensure that all services are supported, to ensure that they understand exactly how they do that and how they manage their capacity differently, without huge numbers of shuffling around of patients within the templates that we have. So there's a bit of reframing of demand and capacity arrangements within the various services that deliver that target. Hopefully that helps answer that question, Alex.
Boyd wants to come in to supplement that.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, for board members, the 62-day target is the it's the length of time from the referral for urgent suspicion of cancer to the first cancer treatment. And so there are quite a number of bits that happen within that pathway, including not just the referral and the initial assessment, but then the diagnostic bit, which requires, and somebody has raised about, I think it was Sarah, about diagnostics. So there are lots of steps in the pathway. I think while outsourced sort of pathways beyond this board may be part of it, a lot of what is in the pathways within our own gift. And so shaving off a day or two here and there in a pathway can make all the difference between hitting the 62 days or not achieving it till 64 or 68 days. And so we will need to refocus and double our efforts to accelerate the pathway. It is to be noted that the national patterns are similar. We're seeing similar patterns in other boards in Scotland where the 62-day has dropped. That is perhaps reflective of a variety of pressures coming to bear. So if there are excessive admissions, that may impact on bed availability for people that are coming for cancer treatment, and you need to reconfigure your efforts to make sure that the cancer pathway is not deprioritized relative to the acute admission pathway. And that is a constant challenge, which is playing out in all boards across Scotland and has done through this winter. So just wanted to supplement the answer that Catherine had given. Thanks.
Thanks, Boyd. Alex, you want to come back in? You're in mute.
I'm like Sarah, my buttons are sticky today. Yeah, thanks for that. That makes sense, and I hope that Lorraine and the team can push forward, and we'll get some improvement on this shortly. Thank you.
Joanne.
Thank you. Catherine, it's a couple of questions on endoscopy and radiology. I note from the report that the endoscopy team are in the process of seeking JAG accreditation. I just wondered if you could give me some idea of timescales and when that's likely to see any improvements to the wait lists for patients. My second question is around radiology. You note in it that capacity planning is ongoing with the government. I'm just wondering what stages that is at and when you expect to see any changes within that from what Scottish Government are asking. Thank you.
Absolutely. So the JAG accreditation is a process that allows us to actually train people within the Highlands, within Raigmore, to become endoscopists. At the moment, colleagues have to travel a very long way to the south of Scotland and indeed at times into England to actually to become endoscopy qualified. So actually bringing this training forward will be a huge benefit to the Highlands and indeed the north of Scotland, and it will also encourage recruitment into this area. In particular, you'll be aware, Joanne, that we've been working over a number of years to support nurse endoscopists, so it means that we can do that training locally as well, and we know that if we can train people locally, we will retain people locally and we'll have more resilient services. The expectation that we will complete that and become JAG accredited over the course of this coming through 2023. We'll be working on that with the relevant authorities that come to ensure that we are at the level that we need to be in terms of delivering on that. And obviously the benefits for that is that we can build the workforce, retain the workforce and keep the workforce here in the Highlands. And that means we've got the capacity to deliver. In terms of radiology, we were asked to return our submissions in terms of our trajectories across TTG, outpatients and diagnostics. That's endoscopy and radiology, the 8 key diagnostic tests. And those were requested to be submitted and in with the government a little over a week ago. So we have those submitted for discussion. We're currently waiting for a follow-up discussion with government colleagues. They're considering all the submissions that have come into them from across Scotland, and they will then want to have a further conversation with us over those trajectories as to whether they believe they are meeting expectation. And obviously once we've cleared that up with them, we'll be bringing that back for further discussion within the health board in terms of just exactly how we're going to deliver on those ambitions. The initial sort of non-formal response has been positive to us, but we do need to have detailed discussion with them on what we've submitted to them. Hopefully that responds to that, Joanne.
Do you want to come back? Okay, thanks. Bert.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Catherine, my query is about SAERs. I'm just wondering if I'm too far ahead in the report just now, or is it okay to speak about that right now?
That's absolutely fine, and I will bring Boyd in to respond to questions around SAERs.
Thank you, Catherine. Yes, good morning, Boyd. I'm just interested in your remark about the SAERs, where you say that the reported numbers remain low, but it gives rise to the question whether there should have been others, or whether there are others which have not been identified. I just wondered if you could expand a little bit about that, so that I can understand more about what you're saying there, and is there anything that needs to be done to try and establish whether or not that is the case? Thank you.
So thanks, Bert and Chair. So first of all, the first thing to say is that we think one of the main reasons why the numbers lower is that actually we have a different process, so we're doing more early case reviews, which means that instead of parking lots of cases in a queue for an SAER, which can take a great many months to happen, we're going to earlier to a detailed case review as an alternative, which gives you a quicker response time, a quicker understanding of the case. And so that methodology is being applied very usefully, particularly in some parts of the organisation where previously we would have had a build-up of SAERs, and that backlog would have become problematic. So that means that there's a greater focus then when we have a smaller number, there can be a better focus on those. There is always, with any of these cases, situations, the question that you've just posed, which is, are we sure that we're not missing anything? And I think the methodology to make sure that things aren't missed is that where any important adverse event occurs, where there's any thing that's not gone so well and learning could come from it, it will feed into our quality and patient safety system. It has a check-in that will also look for a duty of candour and whether that applies. And these meetings, which are happening across the organisation, will identify the cases which they think need to have a process. And I've described 2 of the main processes that are used. There can be others as well. For instance, review of a case in the morbidity and mortality meeting is another example. So there's quite a lot of other reviews which don't then come into this data, but which sit under it as part of the overall system. And so we can look at the numbers that we see here as the ones that have been identified, particularly as requiring this particular process, as opposed to the other cases which feed through the system in the ways that I've described.
Alex, Bert rather, so, okay. Boyd, just while you're on, in terms of freedom of information, the report refers to the level 2 intervention by the Scottish Information Commissioner. Would you like to just say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we had a little run of response times being not within the time target of 20 days, and we were getting about 75% when the target is 95%, or certainly over 90%. That was then resulted in a letter to us from the Information Commissioner, which basically pointed this out, asked that we carry out our internal intervention with that. We've done that, and colleagues will note that we have now for a year maintained a very high response rate within the time that is allotted. And so I would expect that the Information Commission's interest will close off in due course, although that has not been formally communicated as yet. But the performance has been maintained, and I don't expect that the performance should drop. So I'm pleased that with the data that's presented, and I would expect that we will probably take FOI off the IPQR when it's when that interest is formally closed.
Thanks, Boyd. Anne.
Thanks, Boyd. I just wanted to come back for a little bit of clarification around the assurance proposal. I probably should have asked this long ago. I was just wondering how that's arrived at. Is it something that the Performance Oversight Board discusses? Is it a proposal that Rhiannon and Dave would put to EDG for discussion? How does it actually be arrived at in terms of the IPQR? Thanks.
So Anne, I think that is a question we should take away for discussion with David Park. My understanding is that the report goes around all of the governance committees, and there are discussions in the governance committees around the relevant elements of data that are relevant to those particular governance committees. And through that process, I would anticipate that there is discussion around the level of assurance around the specifics of the data set that those particular governance committees are interested in. We also bring the report to the FRP, Finance, Resource and Performance Committee, prior to it coming to the board meeting. And again, the level of assurance can be discussed in that meeting. So I suggest we perhaps take that offline and have a further discussion with David Park around that, and consider if we feel that is robust enough, and perhaps articulate a written version of how we arrive at the level of assurance that's being provided within the report.
Possibly a wider question here as well about the levels of assurance across other papers. Anne, do you want to come back in on that?
I'm happy with that. I just and I should say that, I mean, some of the board members will realise probably why I'm asking this question, which really stems from our discussions, our recent discussions following on from the blueprint self-assessment, where I think there was general agreement that the introduction of this to the SBARs has been a good development, but that we now need to ensure we're being consistent and make sure that everybody understands what whether we're assuring process or substance, these sorts of issues. So just to for others who weren't in the room, you know, that's really, I thought it was a very thoughtful discussion last week. So, and that's really what's prompted my questions today. Thanks.
I think there are examples in our papers today where assurance is set at a certain level, and then there's a commentary about how that could be mitigated or improved, which is a good development, I think. Alex.
Yeah, just to follow Catherine's right. The paper did, the IPQR did come to the FRP, and we did discuss it, although we didn't have a huge discussion on that level, if at all. So it's something I think that Dan's right, we need to consider how we're moving forward with it, and what we do with it, and perhaps we need to have more guidance in that particular part as well to see how the discussion go. I was actually going to ask Louise a question about falls. It's in there you're reviewing the falls process. How far through is the review? Because looking at the data and looking at the way it's forecasting through, again, this is something that seems to be sticking. In fact, it's slightly up in terms of trending. We don't seem to be getting any better, shall we say, at the moment. So I just wondered how the review is going, because in your commentary, it does talk about a review of the bed rail situation. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex. And certainly it is one of our huge concerns at the moment, and very much a focus of our work around excellence in care and how we can get to an improved position. We have to acknowledge that we're never going to completely rule out falls. We have to look at harm minimisation. So that's very much the approach we're taking at the moment. In terms of the review, we are hopeful that we're going to get that done quite shortly, because we know, again, it's something that we can't just wait on forever and a day. So we're making good progress, both in terms of the actual practicalities of how we do that, but also how we educate and support staff, and very much looking at the practice issues that support harm reduction.
Thanks, Louise. Any further issues? I wanted just to ask Tim to expand on your commentary about pharmacies and the issues that have arisen in community pharmacies and the work that's being taking place aimed at improving that. And maybe Katrina could supplement your response.
Thanks, Boyd. That is in relation to smoking cessation. Yeah. The smoking cessation performance has been a little bit poor for some time. The numbers are pretty small because it's a very targeted program around smoking cessation in the most deprived areas. I suppose the work that needs to be done is, I suppose, twofold. There's a review of data quality going on at the moment to actually find out what is happening and to make sure that the activity is being accurately collected. But there's also work that is being undertaken to try and prioritise smoking cessation in the pharmacy area. I think during COVID that there was still work undertaken, but it was very difficult, and it's really about re-energising that work and making sure that pharmacists, as well as others, are able to prioritise the work in the most deprived areas.
Katrina, do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think it's probably a bit of a messy problem. The low-hanging fruit have long gone with regards to smoking cessation, so we're left with more challenging stopping strategies, I think. People who find it difficult. The pharmacy service is, I would say, dated. It's a national service. It was set up 15 plus years ago now, and it's aimed at stopping smoking, and over 12 weeks. And the reality is that actually a lot of patients want to support in cutting down first, and the service is not fit for that. A lot of patients who have been smoking, maybe 40 plus cigarettes a day, 12 weeks is ambitious at best. And therefore the tools that are available to us within the national service are not really fit for the breadth of challenges that face us. And sadly, that means that people either end up smoking or going to the GPs, and that then doesn't give them the weekly follow-up, etc. So it's a really it's quite a challenge. I mean, I would say all of us still have patients who come in and try to stop smoking, and we all are still trying to utilise what's available to us. But it's difficult. And we also have the ongoing challenge that Champix was removed from the market. And as a tool for someone who is struggling, for that to not be there for those that are finding it very difficult, it's another challenge that's been thrown in there. So I think there's work that needs to be done nationally as well as locally with regards to the pharmacy smoking programme.
Thanks, Katrina. Tim?
Yeah, just to come back, and I certainly agree with what Katrina has said. I think it's also important to comment on vaping, which is an increasing issue and also a complicated one. And there's no simple solution about the harm of vaping compared with the harm of smoking, and it does get tied up within the smoking cessation agenda about how satisfactory it is for people to move from smoking to vaping. And I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on that at a national level, while we do try and also particularly make sure that younger people don't take up vaping. But it's the whole area is still quite complex. But I think it's undoubtedly, while the low-hanging fruit to some extent have gone, there are still a lot of people smoking. I mean, when we're looking at adults, around sort of 20%. There's a lot of work to do.
Thank you, Tim. Any further questions or contributions? Anne?
So Boyd, I've been thinking as the discussion's gone on about my own questions, and I think so. I certainly feel that both in terms of the IPQR, in terms of the data that we are now receiving, and the sort of deeper dives that we are taking within the committees, I can see that in many areas we now have very good and solid improvement plans in place, and that we are making progress with areas where waiting times are longer than we would like them to be. And I think that it's clear that we have made progress with other aspects, for example, the introduction of the OPEL system in terms of coping with winter pressures, in terms of protecting some of our elective capacity. So that is all very reassuring, as well as the data being assuring. I am quite mindful, though, having just been to an area clinical forum, that there are a number of members of staff who probably wouldn't share that view and are still feeling very pressured in their own areas. And there are a number of, well, quite a lot of our patients and the public out there who, are in probably some cases in distress and pain, waiting for services from us. So I think it's, I just wanted to say a little bit about that in case anybody was thinking that I had any doubts about the performance of our executive team in terms of where we want to go to, but more importantly, our clinicians who are out there every day doing their absolute utmost to provide the best service that they can. So, I am content to accept the moderate assurance that's being offered for the reasons that I've stated, but I think it is important that as a board, we do acknowledge the feelings of some of our staff and some of our patients and public who are still waiting much longer and facing quite difficult working conditions. So I just wanted to make those remarks before we close this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne, for articulating that so well. And I think it's a view that certainly I would share, and I'm sure others on the board would share as well. We tend to focus in these meetings on areas of concern or areas where we require further information or greater clarity. But when you look at the sum of the parts in the report, there are a lot of encouraging signs there, a lot of positives, a lot of positive data emerging. And I would want to thank Catherine and all the others involved in the performance aspects that are reported on here. We are on a journey with the IPQR. There's more to be done, particularly possibly on the Q and the R part of the report. So with that in mind, I don't see any other hands present. So are we prepared then to accept moderate assurance and to note the continued and sustained stressors facing both the NHS and the commissioned care services, and bearing in mind that the annual delivery plan and the winter plan continue to support mitigations where possible? Be so minded. Thank you, and thank you, Catherine, for deputising so ably for David this morning.
Thank you.
We move on to the finance report now and invite Heleth to speak to it.
Thank you, Chair. So the financial position at the end of month 11 is a year-to-date overspend of 22.3 million, and we're projecting a final position for this year, which is the end of this week, of 20 million. So given we are nearly at the end of the year, with only 4 days left, there's nothing that we're currently aware of that will deteriorate that position. So hopefully we will be around the 20 million and potentially with opportunities to improve that slightly. The main reasons for the further improvement since the last report have been due to our share of further reductions in the new medicines funds and share of some other national underspend funds out there. And there's also been some improvement within the operational positions as well. So within the Health and Social Care Partnership, we can see a £200,000 improvement in the forecast. And within the acute position, there's improvement of 2 million. And that's due to the additional funding we've had come through for pay awards and the number of vacancies that we hold within the acute. So it's offsetting our supplementary staffing bill effectively. The Argyll and Bute position is as reported at the last board meeting, where we did report that Argyll and Bute were planning to improve their position to a break even. They're now reflecting that within their forecast. We have had a slight improvement of £500,000 to the savings position as well, but it is all non-recurrent. The capital at month 11, we're showing a spend of 22.4 million against our allocation, which is 71% of the allocation. But we are assured, we had an asset management group meeting last week, and we are assured that we're on track to spend that full amount by the end of the year. And there's a lot of work going on within the team to make sure that we have all of that spend recognised. So that's our position for this year. Hopefully, as I say, that's not going to change dramatically now this year. And just to give you a flavour of the position for 23-24, we have submitted our latest plan to Scottish Government, which shows an opening deficit of 98.2 million. We're going to try to deliver a savings plan of 29.5 million against that, which is just over 3.5%, which gives us a projection of 68.7 million deficit. Detail of which will go to the next FRP committee, and we'll present a paper on the plan position at the next board meeting. I'm happy to take any other questions.
Thank you, Helen, for the paper and for the introduction to it. Colleagues, questions for Helen? I can just start off, Helen, but item 5, support services, you're talking about further unplanned allocations from SG, delivery of mitigating actions from the recovery plan. Can you give us any examples of that?
At the recovery plan action, so within the last board papers, I think we've given full breakdown. So some of them contributed things like annual leave accruals. We've reduced our number of annual leave that we're expecting at the end of the year. It was higher due to COVID, and we've been bringing that down to try and bring people down to 0 annual leave. There will be some flex in that, but that's changed that accrual. We've taken quite a rigorous view of our purchase order accruals, so that will improve that position. We've had a number of allocations, as you say, that have come through, things like the New Medicines Fund. We've had a reduction in our contributions for the C Norwich, which is our litigation payment. So there's various things like that we've had come through.
Okay, thank you. Jerry.
Thank you, Boyd. It was really just a question. I think, as you say, Helen, not a lot probably expecting to change between now and the end of the week. So are we confident that the Scottish Government will be content with the figure of round about 20 and would support that with the planned brokerage payments?
We had a conversation with Scottish Government a couple of weeks ago. They actually came up to see us in Inverness, and we did explain our financial position. It's obviously slightly above our original plan of 16 million, but they were, I would say, comfortable rather than accepting of the fact that we were going to be nearer the 20. Obviously, their ask of us is to bring that down as much as we possibly can and as near to the 16 or better if we can. So I think accept possibly isn't quite the right word, but their understanding of the position, and they have recognised it. With regards to brokerage, we don't actually know what the position is going to be around brokerage going forward, given the gap for next year and future years. So we're still waiting for guidance on things like brokerage and how any of the how that's going to work going forward. Not sure.
Sarah.
Thanks. Thanks, Helen. And I know this will all have been discussed and scrutinised at FRP, but I just wonder if we could talk a little bit about the approach. So obviously in the past, when as a board we had a financial deficit, various kind of methodologies were deployed to get back on top of that, you know, PMO approaches, kind of external support, which was really helpful at the time. But I know we also did a lot of work to try and embed that within the organisation so that we could, you know, try and do that for ourselves. Appreciate there's still a lot, you know, that isn't kind of finalised, and there will need to be plans will need to be kind of gone through in more detail. But I wonder if you could just tell me a little bit more about what our approach is going to be, if we have that capacity within the organisation to if need be take on a slightly different approach, and what we might be seeing at the board in the future as we kind of progress those plans. Thanks.
Yes, I'll try. So the ability to make any savings at the moment is extremely challenging, and I know that all boards, we've had to provide our savings plan and intentions as part of our planning submission. But it's been a struggle across organisations to actually identify those savings going forward. The national team, so the Scottish Government team, have introduced their sustainability and value programme, where they're looking at some of the key areas of spend and opportunities for next financial year. But we are still looking at kind of efficiencies rather than long-term change. So there are several groups and areas that they're focusing on, which aren't probably surprise to anyone. They're around supplementary staffing, so focusing on, nurse spend predominantly around framework agreements, making sure that we are only using agencies that are on framework, making sure that we are getting the best kind of value for what we are using on the agency and that we're using initially, and then obviously looking to bring that down. Locum spend, similar, there are things happening where we can do them nationally, and then we need to try and replicate that internally, locally. Again, programs around prescribing, which is the usual kind of area, because our spend predictions on prescribing are quite high as well. So we've got quite a significant amount, I think around 10 million as additional expenditure within the horizon planning for prescribing next year. So that's obviously an area where we need to be looking at. There are areas around travel, admin spend, maximising our digital innovations and things as well, and how we maximise things like Microsoft to make sure that our admin spend is lower than it could be. So there's a lot of the efficiency kind of areas. So what we're trying to do internally is to replicate those areas so that we're maximising all of the national work that's happening, the stuff around procurement as well. So we're making sure that we're on board with what's happening and that we're adhering to all of that. We've also got work that we're doing with the chief officers, looking at their savings plans. So we've put all those sustainability and values opportunities in front of the organisation effectively to say, this is where, if we saved X%, this is where we could go with this. And then what we need to do is for the chief officers then to look at that within their areas and to see where they think they would get the best value. And then we will put the support teams around that. There's no point us kind of dictating where the savings can be if the services don't believe that that's right for them. So it's kind of a two-way process where we've identified the key areas for year one efficiencies. And then we're asking the services to go back and see what they think they could do within that and what support they will need. We'll then make sure that the strategy and transformation team, which we're the PMO team, are wrapped around that, and we'll set up programme boards or groups or whatever if we need to, trying to minimise any new groups that we're setting up, to be honest. And we'll try and use the infrastructure that we've already got. But if we do need to get that assurance, then we will. The main issue, I guess, is looking more into the future as well. It's not just the next year, it's the years beyond that. So what we're trying to do is making sure that we're linking our finances into our strategic direction, and looking more around how we use the ADP next year, how we use things like the performance planning. So as Catherine's mentioned, we have to put our activity plans in. Well, we're looking at that more around what capacity do we have, rather than our activity trajections, actually to see what do we think we can deliver within the money that we've got. So we're approaching it a bit differently to look at what do we have now and what can we deliver for that, rather than where do we want to get to and how do we get there. So it's just a slightly different way of looking at it. There is a workshop being set up in the first week of May, specifically around really nailing down some of this, where we're going to be pulling together a lot of information packs that we can share with services to really look through what those opportunities in the short term and the longer term. But certainly for next year, the main focus will be around the sustainability and value work.
Do you want to come back on that?
No, that's fine. Thank you. Sorry, really sticky buttons today. Yeah, obviously lots to discuss at our FRP meetings, but that's helpful in understanding that at this point. A big challenge ahead, but thank you, Hillis.
Alex.
Yeah, thanks for that, Helen. Yeah, I'm glad to see that you've avoided I suppose it would be temptation to say we want to save 3.5%, so everybody gets a 3.5% saving target. That doesn't seem to be what we're doing, which is good. And I appreciate the fact that we're trying to focus on the areas that are potentially the ones where the efficiencies are highest. So fully supportive of that, and we'll see how we go. I'm just worried about this bow wave that potentially is going to come through from next year to the year after to the year after. which is something that we're conscious of and we're very wary of, but that's a challenge that we face. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Just a question, Heleth, about where we're at in terms of developing or scoping the possibility for shared services across other NHS boards, or indeed across our boundaries, possibly with council.
Yes, the conversation, the things that we're looking at. So there was a Directors of Finance meeting a couple of weeks ago where we were specifically looking at areas of opportunities, areas where we can work across our kind of more local boundaries. So the north of Scotland, what we could do with our colleagues in the islands and Grampian and Lothian in particular. We are working quite closely with those on some of the things around procurement and things like that. Quite recently, we've done the internal audit procurement work with them, and there's some other procurement that we're looking to take on quite soon that we will reach out to the partners as well to see how we can do that once and try and secure better prices. There's the work around some of our services. We are looking at our more transactional services and what's the scope to do something more national. The bit we need to be careful about is taking the assumption that if we do something nationally, that will automatically mean we save money. It won't necessarily. What we're looking in the first instance is around having resilience, just to make sure that the services we provide, we can staff and we can make sure we've got a strong service force. So the stronger argument probably around some of our corporate functions in particular and making sure that they are robust is around looking at how we partner with other organisations to get that resilience. There should then be some cost efficiencies that come out of it as well. So those conversations are happening. They're happening, they're live, less so possibly with the council at the moment, but certainly is an area to explore with the council. We're having those conversations clearly around the services that we provide together, but not so much around the corporate functions.
Yep. And I recognise that the danger of shared services is that you lose employment opportunities in localities as well, or in particular board areas if they're shared across boards. So there is a downside to shared services.
I think we can mitigate that a bit more at the moment, given the use of technology. So where we are looking potentially at having those kind of shared services, we're not looking at moving people's place of employment necessarily, because we can work so virtually now. So hopefully that wouldn't be an issue if we can appoint people within a locality or an area because we've got that specialty and that kind of expertise in our area. Then I think that would happen. So that's the benefit, is we can maximise where the workforce is, rather than everyone trying to recruit their own. So we certainly wouldn't be looking to lift and shift all the people to sit in one office, which was probably the traditional way. We'd be looking more at virtual working and that kind of shared working in that way, so that we can maximise on job opportunities, places, and we don't lose that local working at all. It's just that we have the resilience as people can access each other's systems and provide that support.
And in terms of the 20 million deficit this year, we're not out of kilter with other boards in Scotland.
No, we are at the higher end, certainly, but we're not the worst. We're not the biggest overspend, and I guess where we do differ slightly is that ours was predominantly projected. We're not significantly over our initial opening position. Some of the other boards were projecting break-evens and then have deteriorated. So I guess it doesn't make us any better, but at least it does show that our financial planning and understanding of our position is a bit stronger.
Given that we've gone through a 3-year savings programme, we're looking now at a different scenario, certainly a very steep rise in the deficit. as we go into the next phase, but I suspect we should be looking at it in terms of the Together We Care strategy and the transformation journey that's required there, and that it should be linked and possibly in terms of timescale to the 5-year strategy, rather than anything short term. Any other contributions on finance for Health? If not, we're being asked to take limited assurance on this paper, and helpful comments on the level of assurance are provided in section 2.4. Are we content to take limited assurance? Thank you, colleagues. We move on now to the initial budget offer to Argyll and Bute IJB. Health, you're up again.
Thank you. Yes, hopefully this is just a short paper. So we have made our initial offer, which is based on the NRAC percentage share to Argyll and Bute. The Argyll and Bute NRAC has reduced slightly, so that is reflected within the uplift. So the overall NHS uplift is 2%. The IGB share of that is 1.55 uplift because of that reduction in NRAC. As you can see, that percentage share is within the paper at 220 million, and we've also included the estimate of our additional in-year allocations that we have, and they include things like our primary care allocations. This has all been worked through with Argyll and Bute, and it's been provided within the planning submission that we provide to Scottish Government, and it will equal the figures and numbers that Argyll and Bute will be taken to their committees and formal processes as well. But happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Helen. Any response from Argyll and Bute direction? Sarah.
Thanks, Boyd. So don't worry, I'm not going to say anything controversial at all. We're completely well, content maybe stronger, but that offer is exactly what we were expecting. And you're right, you've worked really closely with James, and we really welcome that joint working, and that's been a good process. I think some people will be aware of this because of other discussions we've had, but just to kind of put it out there, that I suppose it's becoming increasingly apparent that the way that NRAC is applied and then divvied up, combined with our ageing population and our remote rural geography, is a challenge. Doesn't quite work the way you think it should work, but obviously that is a much larger discussion that is happening on a kind of a national stage. But I just wanted to put that out there. I think it's something important for people to hold in the back of their minds, especially when you then consider the relationship that we have with Greater Glasgow and Clyde for Argyll and Bute. So NHS Highland holds an SLA with Greater Glasgow and Clyde, and that is, a lot of our pathways go that way. And those two sort of different sets of calculations for Argyll and Bute are kind of squashing us into a bit of a corner. And many of you will be aware of that in different contexts, but I just wanted to put it out here and for people to kind of hold that in their minds as things progress. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Louise?
Thanks, and I suppose it's probably worth referencing that the NRAC generally is a challenge for NHS Highland at times. I think certainly from a North Highland perspective as well as in Argyll and Bute, we do have some very specific challenges that are different to other areas. I'm not saying there aren't similarities, because clearly they are, but when you think of our geography, some of our areas are more remote and rural than the islands where they have specific payments, for example. So there are real challenges around the whole of Highland and how NRAC is articulated for Scotland, I think. So it's probably just worth referencing that.
Yeah, and there was quite an adjustment in NRAC 2 or 3 years ago, which was to our benefit, and indeed we were questioned about it at the Public Audit Committee, how we had come out with the highest share of it, but that was an adjustment that was made. And just wanted to be confident, Helen, that previous discussions around the Argyll and Bute offer had indicated that there would be an adjustment made in future years for a slight reduction in the past, just to seek assurance that you've had discussions with your counterpart in Argyll and Bute on that.
We've been having conversations with James and Fiona around the NRAC share. Also, just to I guess make the note that there is more and more allocations now coming through as NRAC. A lot more of our allocations have been baselined in order to give us that more confident position on our quantum. And some of the allocations where previously Argyll and Bute didn't receive an NRAC share of them, they are now receiving an NRAC. So even though the NRAC percentages reduced a little, there are some areas as well where they will have had a slight increase in what they've had in the past because we've moved it to an NRAC share. So there are swings and roundabouts for this year's offer. Going forward, obviously, we do need to be mindful of the NRAC share and the fact that that is reducing for Argyll and Bute, because you can't just reduce your services equally always, but there is also potential that the NRAC will be revisited again, so that could change that position. But yes, we're in regular dialogue.
Thanks, Ella. Fiona.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and apologies. Just as you started that item, I had the dreaded phone call from school, so apologies I disappeared from the screen. I had to shout, not now, not now, I'll phone you back. So apologies for that. So yeah, just to confirm that Heleth, myself and James, the Chief Financial Officer for the IJB, have been in really regular dialogue. And, you know, we've got an issue in terms of this offer for this year that we're content with, and we feel it's a fair reflection of the position that we're currently in. I think the wider issues that Sarah has referenced and others, Louise too, are really about a longer term sustainability for population areas like Argyll and Bute, where depopulation has set in and is proving to be a very difficult trend to reverse. And I think that whatever formula was applied, that unless a mechanism is included that has a kind of floor or a bottom line in it, which, as I understand it, NRAC currently doesn't have, it's going to be very difficult for areas that have, as Argyll and Bute does, a very dispersed but depopulating demographic, because there will always have to be a minimum level of service that's provided in each of our localities or main towns, and that really can't be taken beyond a certain point without that service becoming unsustainable. And I'm not sure that any of our current funding mechanisms really look to reflect that particular demographic challenge. As others have said, our NRAC has adjusted somewhat this year, but our greater concern are in subsequent years, where the current forecasts that are being provided by Public Health Scotland would indicate that there's going to be a greater rate of decline in years coming up over the next 3 to 5 years. So I feel that this year we've been given a warning, if you like, and we've made our peace with Heleth, and we know where we are for 23-24, and we know that that's going to have similar savings challenges for us in Argyll and Bute that you have in the board area, although I would say not to the same scale, which is welcome and a credit to the work that we've done over our transformation and change programme over the last number of years. But it is subsequent years that I think that this wider topic will need to be revisited to try and make sense of what this means for people and communities in our area. And then we have to work out the methodology that fits that, not, I think, get into a dispute about the methodology, forgetting the people and the service that are needed on the front line. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Fiona. Any final comments? If not, are we happy as a board to approve the budget offer to Argyll and Bute IJB? We are. Thank you, colleagues. Well, we're now due to take a comfort break. Just to say before we do that, that there is a corporate risk register, a new paper has been published on our site. And if you haven't had a chance to take a quick look at it, maybe you might be able to do so over a slightly extended coffee break. I think if we try to get back at 11:10, please.